Hey, good morning, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions. It is Thursday, April 10th. We're beginning our work today with our legal counsel, John Gray, who's going to give us a walkthrough of one of the bills that the committee is contemplating working on. It is H-294, which deals with DOC with a commissary and telecommunications. So it's all yours, John, and if you could identify yourself for the record.
Let's do it. John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel. And there we go. H-294. So this is a bill that does a couple of things. H-294 removes costs for communications services in corrections facilities. It applies restrictions to the commissary prices that can be sold to tie them to fair market value in a community. We'll come to that in section 2. It requires evaluation of particular vendor contracts and then applies a federal minimum wage for offenders. So let's start with the text. An act relating to commissary and telecommunications prices in state correctional facilities and fair compensation for incarcerated labor. Our section 1 here that you see is amending the statute that governs the use of telephones within corrections facilities. So what you see here is a transition from having telecommunications at cost to moving to no cost. So in subsection A on page 2, inmates shall within 24 hours be allowed access to a telephone for outgoing telephone calls at no expense to the inmate. Shall be allowed easy access in placing telephone calls. So you see that removal of collect because you're no longer being charged for these services at no expense upon admission to a correctional facility. Under subsection C, when an inmate requests and receives a list of parties approved to receive telephone calls, so that portion is still maintained in law, the inmate shall be provided a system to place such calls at no expense to the inmate. And you can see the removal of the debit system provisions because you would no longer need those once you've moved to a no expense. Under subsection D, any contract to provide telephone or other communication services. So that is important to note, this is broadly telecommunications, not just telephone. Any contract to provide telephone or other communication services to inmates shall be negotiated and awarded in a manner that provides for no cost to inmates, to their families, and to others communicating with inmates. So it goes beyond just the inmate themselves. Those costs can't be pushed onto the entities to which they're speaking. And then under subsection E, the department may supplement telephone use, and this was the part I was getting about it being broadly telecommunications and not just telephone. Department may supplement telephone use with other communication services, including video and electronic communication services, provided that any other communicating services shall be offered at no expense to the inmate. So simple concept, no expense for telecommunication services, and those can't be shifted on to the parties that you're reaching out to either. I don't know what the economic impact of this would be for the corrections facilities themselves, but that is the proposal under section 1.
Questions?
I mean, at some point we'll get DOC and we'll ask about the money.
I have DOC because right now inmates are not free to call anybody that they want. There has to be an approved list of folks that the inmate can correspond with, and DOC has direction of that. They have control of that. You can always respond to your lawyer, and it depends on family members because some of the family members may be the victim in the crime. So they're very, very careful on that. And also what happens if inmates do contact folks, they call collect quite often. So it's the family member or the other entity that's picking up that charge. There is also, if you look on line 13 through 15, there is a debit system that the inmate can pay for the telephone service, and it's taken from their account. So if they're lucky enough to have family members that can contribute money to them and put in their account, that happens quite sometimes that the family members can do that. Other times, if an inmate is able to work within the facility, then they're earning something that they can put into an account and they can pull it from that. So that's how it's operating right now that I'm aware of.
Any details about financial impact, logistics, that's for another time, right?
That's, yeah, DOC will have, if we're really interested in working on this, we'll be working directly with DOC, and maybe also some family members or folks who are, because I know in my own community, I have parents whose sons are incarcerated, and one family in particular makes sure that there's money in that person's account so that you can buy things, commissary
Mhm.
and phone calls.
Yep.
Not every family has that ability.
Yep.
Sean?
I just but on page 3, are we there
You're
yet?
not there yet.
Okay, got it. Sorry.
Unless you're on,
Jumping ahead.
unless you're on lines 1 and 2.
No, sorry.
You're an Energizer bunny.
I know. I'm just ahead
I'm
of
gonna take the
myself.
battery out of you.
Yeah.
Okay, John.
Oh, wait.
Anything else on this one? Okay.
The battery's still going strong at this point in the session. That's.
Right, that's pretty good. He's just getting wound up.
Yeah, it just started.
So you can think of some of the sections as conceptually distinct is what I would say. So the first is dealing with no cost telecommunications. Section 2 is dealing with a separate subject. So section 2, the chair had spoken about having funds in your account so that you can purchase things from the commissary. Section 2 is about commissary. So this is creating a new section to say that any contract to provide commissary services to inmates in state correctional facilities shall be negotiated and awarded in a manner that provides that prices shall be set so as not to exceed by more than 10% the fair market value for comparable products sold in the community where the facility is located. So what this is saying is, look at the community around the facility. What are they selling the same services that they're offering in the commissary for? And then you have to negotiate and award contracts so that the prices can't be set to exceed by more than 10% that fair market value within the community. In the absence of something like this, you could have wildly out of sync prices for commissary services.
How would you define in the community? Is it the community, and this is what I would just flag, is it the community in which the facility is located, that region, or is it the state, or is it the region?
So I think that's a good question to ask because it is not defined here what the community is. What I would note, though, is that I didn't invent this language. This was drawn from other pieces of Title 28. So this is used elsewhere to get at, but you could specify if you wanted to talk, if you wanted to make clear, and you could have good reason for wanting to make clear what that exact community is. Is it discrete? Is it the, yeah, I think this would be a natural place to tighten up. But just to call out, this is not novel language. This has been used elsewhere.
And it's used in Title 28.
I think it's Title 28. It's been a while
That's
since
your
I looked at
DOC
this.
That's your DOC title.
Exactly.
Can you say how it is used? I mean, you said you haven't looked at it recently, but
I mean, it doesn't specify either what the community is. I just want to call out that this term of art, looking to the community, is something that has been accepted in law, but it's been, and normally I try to prep things as I come in. It's just been frantic this morning
yeah, of
already.
course.
And I'm happy to, if folks are interested in these sections, give you a much clearer picture of what you could do and where we have used that.
So commissary has a lot of things in there. It could be snacks that you wouldn't get in the cafeteria. It could be something like that. It could be clothing. It could be socks. It could be
Books.
books. It could be a real variety of daily needs. Your personal hygiene could be toothpaste, toothbrush, that type of thing. If you wanted something different than what is already provided, and articles of clothing or even entertainment and things. One thing I want to make sure is, does the proceeds from the commissary go into their rec fund? In their rec fund, there's a real.
Portion of the-
Hmm?
My understanding that is that a portion of those.
It goes into the
kick
rec
back
fund.
to the DOC for the rec fund, yeah.
Sean?
How is any of this tracked and how do you stay on top of it?
DOC. It's all internal to DOC.
Okay,
It's all internal to DOC.
but
It's a
like, would
stru-
they,
They contract out for the commissary services.
but would they give us a list of like, okay, so Coca-Cola
Yep.
is $1.99, we're charging $2.20. Like, are they giving us a list so we can
It's
see?
DOC that's making the charges.
No, it's not DOC, it's the commissary. It's the people who run.
Well, then the
system.
commissary, are they gonna give us something like that? That tells us, is there a list?
Correct.
Like,
And you can ask for it just to call. I feel like a lot of times I go to committees and people ask for information. It's like, that is, you guys can do that. Like, that's
Yeah.
the powers that you have. Yeah.
Because if not, there's like, whatever, we'll charge what we want. Who's gonna check?
It's part of that contract that our DOC has with the firms
Keith, yeah.
Okay,
that are providing the items in that commissary service.
okay.
It's not DOC that provides those items. Kevin and then Troy?
Rationale for the 10% as opposed to 30%?
Ask the sponsor that question.
Oh, I put a number in there, yeah.
I think we have seen in other states a cap at FMV, even.
Fair
It's been a while
market.
since, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Sorry, we've seen in other, like, if you think about this concept, I think that in other states, they have pursued this at an even lower level, which is to tie to fair market value. You wouldn't even exceed. They're basically saying, look to the community, set your prices based on what the community does. But this allows for some excess with the idea, I think, that business practices may require some markup.
Well, it's gotta be, I would assume it's more costly to bring things into the
I don't know. You have to ask those folks. Yeah.
No,
contractors say that.
no, but not for this. No, it's the companies that are providing this service that are making the money.
I know.
But it's not to bring it, I don't think it's to bring it into the facility.
You don't think they're checking it like contractors with their tools?
And they would be checking it, but they're coming in through a different door. They're
Yeah.
coming in through a delivery door. They're not coming in through, what contractors would be coming in through the main doors
Here,
for that and work and looking in the living units. These are not in your living units, I don't believe. I think they're more into your common areas for that. So there's a different delivery system for it.
okay.
Troy and then Joe.
I do just want to state that, I would need more information on this, and I don't know if you know this off the top of your head or not, John. But I think DOC has some limitations right now in statute that would prevent them from running commissary. Competition with other,
Competition with private.
yeah, so that's a question that I'd like to play with as well.
Okay.
That do we need to even
Make
use
additional, yeah.
a private entity here, or can we set up statute so that, correct, and I don't know what DOC's take on this is, but can we set this up so that they're just running the commissary? And there are states that do state-run commissary. I don't know what they are.
Okay.
Joe?
At some point, and I know this isn't the proper time, but it would be nice to get testimony from a vendor that does this. Because obviously there are overhead challenges. Because one would not open a convenience store when there are 200 customers. Right? Because it wouldn't make sense. So, there are some scale issues and I don't know what the overhead is. I'd like to hear this. I don't, you really can't say what an equitable premium would be. There certainly is one. But it certainly costs more to sell a widget in a corrections facility commissary than it does at Walmart. So if you can't, if it's $1 a plus, it's at your local, dollar store, it can't be sold for $1 profitably in a correctional facility. And it can only be sold at a loss, and there will be no vendors. So
Well, the vendors are contracting out with a lot of different DOC departments across the country. So it's not just focused on that one facility in Vermont. It's
Sure.
nationwide, so
we would need to,
we need to understand how that system works.
but that's a puzzle piece I think we would certainly need in order to make a
Mhm.
reasonable determination.
We'll have DOC in for, this is a walkthrough of Ledge Council, so folks can keep track of the questions that are being asked, and then we'll set up the testimony accordingly. Do you have something, Sharon?
Well, I was gonna say, doesn't fair market value then equate to, it takes that price, but it also takes the price from Kinney Drugs and which is $5 for that and knock it that like, I'm not sure. It seems like yeah, exactly. So there's not a lot, that's not definitive. I got you.
And I think it goes to the community question too, like what that region you set is for determining FMV.
Well, I think you also have to compare it to vending machines we get a vending machine in this building. Are those prices more than what you're gonna find in the local Walmart? It's kind of the same thing. You got a company that's
Convenience.
supplying the vending machines.
Yeah, and there's labor there, and they're probably paying a premium to the state for having it.
So it's probably a little equitable there to compare it to facilities, because it's a vending company that's supplying it. Anything else on this one?
Well, and a downside is if you make it too, if you take away the profit, then you could lose the commissary.
Mhm.
So there's got to be a balance, otherwise you're gonna lose the service.
It is, you know, the other side of that coin is it would be really nice to know what things look like for residents. The commissary right now, is a bag of chips $10? Is it $1.50? Like, I don't know any of it.
And we can get that.
That's line 8.
We'll get that.
You guys are gonna love the next section.
Oh, God.
So all the discussions you were just having are highly salient for section 3. This is an actual evaluation of particular contracts. So on or before January 1, 2026, DOC to evaluate its contracts with Global Tel-Link Corporation and the Keith Group. So these are existing contracts, and report to you guys or the General Assembly broadly on whether, and this gets at some of the refinement that y'all were talking about with FMV, fair market value, whether it needs to be thinking about area or comparable vendors. So under 1, evaluate whether each vendor offers its services or products to incarcerated individuals at prices substantially higher than applicable to comparable services or products offered in the community where the facility is located. So are they doing high in excess of that FMV, basically? And this is to the refinement that you guys were bringing up. They have to evaluate whether each vendor offers its services or products to incarcerated individuals at prices substantially higher than offered by competing vendors. Because one thing that you could imagine is that vendors might be competing for these contracts, but basically they're able to offer a lower cost to the state by passing on that cost to the actual inmates. And so that's what the second piece gets at is, are they receiving bids, basically competing vendors that aren't trying to pass on as much cost to the vendors, and they're getting pass on as much cost to the inmates, and their contracts are being rejected because these other folks can operate at a lower price. So 2 pieces there, whether they're higher in the community around, substantially higher, and then also are you offering at substantially higher than offered by competing vendors?
Well, Sean, you're on a question.
Yeah, so substantially higher. That doesn't seem ethical to me.
You mean it doesn't seem ethical for someone to do that, or for me to have written it this way?
Absolutely, you writing it. No, that like each vendor offers its services incarcerated at prices substantially higher. How can they?
Can I send you some literature?
I was gonna say, you may be surprised.
Yeah, you might be really surprised at what's going on.
Yeah, but I mean, but I don't think they should. I mean,
Yeah, neither do I.
yeah,
That's why I wrote a bill.
yeah, but like it seems like that's
Got a bill.
it's okaying it.
Gotta support it, Troy.
Oh, no. So just to characterize what the point of this section is, this is so you guys can have the information to make legislative decisions.
Oh, I gotcha. Sorry,
So
10-4.
it's an evaluation of
Exactly.
contracts.
All right.
Because right now, and this is that's why I was saying this section is really salient based on the discussions you were just having. It's hard to jump like you need to know the information to make.
Right.
I do want to explore though with you, Representative Sweeney, that reaction.
Did you want?
So-
20 bucks in this copy.
Now evaluate.
Okay.
Thank you, Rail.
You gotta look at the words on the paper to
Got it.
understand.
I do feel
So
that
if
was
you
a
look on
powerful
line
reaction.
12, if you look on line 12, the DOC shall evaluate
Mhm.
its contracts
So
and report.
On weather.
I should say this too. But I always come into a room intending to screen share, but I don't always ask people if it is helpful for me to screen share. And I know that sometimes it is not. Like sometimes it actually distracts people from looking at the thing, or it creates so I can do whatever you guys' preference is, but just to,
Trying to get them to read the words on the bill.
I tried in every room I go to.
It's January. Read it and think about it
Just-
and interpret it.
Just like comma or missing comma,
I-
the difference, you gotta.
I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
Yeah, let's not go down the common road.
Well, I wasn't even going there.
Things are better not to remember.
Literally, like understanding
Yes.
what's actually there and then glossing over a word, because it can change that.
All right, page 4. So the Global Care Link is for the telecommunications and the Keith Group is the commissary.
Which are the current providers.
Do you know, and we don't know how long we've had contracts on those folks. Okay.
And
So
so
one of them was coming up though, when they were here last. One of them was kind of coming up to the end of that contract. I'm not sure which one.
Yeah, I don't
Isaac had
remember.
mentioned that.
Definitely, I recall. Yeah, I definitely recall there's something expiring at the end of 2026, but I'm not sure if it's.
I don't remember which one it is.
And so far, I haven't read in pages 1 through 3, access to, how much time, all that kind of stuff, what the rules.
So it doesn't speak to that. Yeah, this is just addressing the cost related and then.
Understand.
Yep.
So there isn't another statute someplace that defines all that,
So if,
roughly what they have available to them?
if folks want to explore that, I could come back with, essentially what we do have on the books. And it's possible, like, so for instance, just to scroll back up to section 2, when I was looking at putting these into law, I was surprised that there's often not a relevant section that speaks to particular pieces. So it's possible that things you might envision would be regulated are not. And I could let you know what is not.
I would personally think that would be important to this.
What are you trying to get? I'm trying to follow what
Well,
you're
to
asking.
find out if we're going from, there is no access at all, which I know it's not true,
Okay.
to unlimited
Oh, okay.
cell
We're,
phone.
right.
Sure.
whatever, You know, and I know that's not the case, but someplace in between is where we are.
So that's a DOC operational.
So that's that.
And I can tell you that because the statute on providing at no cost exists, it presumes that these things are available, right? Like they have to be available, otherwise the statute doesn't make any sense to it.
Right.
But the degree to which it is.
To the degree, that's what I'm interested.
And there may be, and there would be different commissary from the male facilities and the female facilities. They would be different. It wouldn't be the same. Hmm?
There's different needs.
I mean.
Did you really say that?
What he said,
Oh.
I didn't hear what you said.
So there should be different commissaries, and I said, well, there's different needs.
There's different needs.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm talking about telecommunication.
Oh, I thought you
I was talking about commissary.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I would be surprised at the telecommunication.
Oh, that wouldn't be different. No.
I'm surprised.
What might be different, you know what might be different?
You'd have different needs. I go, really?
What might be different
Come over my side.
There's a little red button out there.
Well, it might be different
Okay.
for the telecommunication
All right.
between the two. For the women's facility, they may not have family that is providing money for them.
Because you could literally have a difference in facilities themselves.
Right. Could have differences in facilities as well. And also the telecommunication thing, we also have to look at the out-of-state beds in Mississippi. Because I don't know if it's the same contractor there, but it's the same setup where, and for the commissary, where they need to have an account. The inmates need to have an account for that. So we can't forget the Mississippi piece. Okay,
So-
section 4.
Section 4, I will call out that these were drafted by my colleague Sophie, but it's simple enough for me to walk through what they accomplish here. This is providing for federal minimum wage. So this is your provisions governing offender work. And I recall in discussions with Brett Pedrick that this includes work camp, which is a specific question that came up at that time.
For crew?
Work crew.
Work camp or work crew or both? Because they're different.
Okay, well, now I've got
Work
to
crew is different than work camp. They're very
go
different.
back and check my emails. Let's see.
Know that it's spelled out in here. It just is defined that offenders shall.
But yeah, and let me quickly pause screen share and see if I can find the definition for offender. So we can-
Offender is for folks who are sentenced.
So work crew,
Work crew is a court order. They
That
do
wouldn't-
have a sentence as part of their
I
sentence.
think it would include everybody that is currently providing work via the
But
DOC.
work crew, they're not being compensated,
No, I know.
particularly the new system. It's a voluntary. Work camp, it's a structure where they are incarcerated at the work camp facility in St. Jay. And they provide services to nonprofits and municipalities. They could be painting a building, they could be cleaning a recreational area, they could be doing work on a recreation management area where you need trails cleaned out. There's a lot of painting of buildings. It could be libraries, it could be churches, it could be nonprofits that are own buildings that they're trying to market. So the crew goes out, they have a structure, they have a crew leader, someone who's the DOC staff, they have a vehicle and tools. And they go to the site and do the work. And then they go back to the facility at the end of the day.
But that's unpaid. Is that correct? It's just-
What you get for being part of a work camp, you get a day off your sentence for every day you serve. So if you have a 2-year sentence and you qualify for the work camp, you're out in 1 year.
Okay, so it's time
Yeah.
off.
It's time off.
So in a way you are earning something.
And it's a very limited, we don't have enough people that now qualify for work camp as we did back in the 90s. We only have very small people that qualify, but you have to, it can't be certain crimes wouldn't qualify. You have to have a certain length of sentence to qualify. We don't have those folks in as much as we used to,
Those people just don't have incarcerated sentences anymore.
right? There were a lot of misdemeanors that would go through there, and we just don't have that anymore. We used to have over 200 people in work camps.
Do we have work crews still?
That's another issue. We worked on that last year. There were work crews prior to last year, and prior to COVID, where it comes from a sentence from the court, and the person could be assigned to a work crew, which is person's not incarcerated. There would be a program like there's a cemetery. I'm going to use the example. There was a cemetery here that quite often the supervisor of the cemetery was willing to work with DOC. The court would send folks to the person to manage, clean the cemetery, mow, take care of the cemetery. It could be 3 or 4 people that the state's attorney, defense counsel, and the court sentenced to a work crew. The person that was sentenced to the work crew violated that, didn't show up, then there's a violation and the person could be incarcerated. So it is part of a sentence, but they don't go to corrections. They're not coming from a correctional facility.
Right.
So if they serve out their work crew time, which could be 2 weeks, then their sentence is served.
That could be 3 days.
But they're not paid.
No, it's part of their sentence. So Troy and then Brian.
I just want to take a beat and just reiterate the intent of this section of the statute that I explained when I introduced it a week or 2 ago. My intent is grounded in the belief, the philosophical value that all labor has value. I think that's true for me. I know that's true for me. The bill doesn't specify this, but when we get there, let's not do it now, but when we get to sub C4, it envisions the ability to, as we start paying incarcerated labor, for that to be distributed into a fund that can partially go to a victim's restitution fund, can partially go to the inmate's savings account or dependents on the outside, so that when they are released, there is money there to reduce recidivism. And then some of it, of course, can be used in the moment at the overpriced commissaries. So that's those sub C4 doesn't really get into that, but that was the vision. That's the intent, that when we start paying labor fairly, we create systems that pay a restitution fund that sets an inmate up better for when they're released and allows them to spend some money in the moment. That's the intent.
I know where number 4 originally came from and what the intent was.
Yeah, Reptina did some of this last year too.
Yeah, but at the current law,
Yeah.
talking about, I know where that came from. Ryan?
Yes, I think it builds on Troy's comment. I accept the notion that labor is labor, but at some point, I think we're gonna have to talk about the notion of compensation, and if you're compensated in time off. Are there different ways of paying labor, and is work camp and work crew, are they different from
Yeah.
working in a facility, you know?
I'm open to having that conversation.
Cool.
That's the same thing I have. is-
Yeah.
We've talked about this before, but like if you're say in the laundry room, I don't know what jobs they have in it, but you're in the laundry room and you're doing work and nobody else is in the facility is doing it, then I think you should get paid. But if your sentence is, say work camp and you're getting a day off for every day you work, that is quite the compensation. I know for in our own compensation packages, we got that, I know it's different. But if we got 60 days off a year versus, 2 weeks, we would consider that compensation, so like just having that more, and I know it's different.
No, just one more clarification. We changed the Vermont Constitution to prohibit indentured servitude, and what we're discussing here verges on, is that defined as indentured servitude? Because by Vermont state constitution, it is prohibited, any form, slavery, indentured servitude in any form. So if you're requiring somebody to do work to pay off their time, that to me dances with indentured servitude. And I think that's going to be an important constitutional question we will have to answer in that conversation.
When in that conversation, you get, are we making them or are they asking? Right. It's a bigger conversation. I get it.
Yeah.
Is it voluntary or is it forced?
So if you guys go down this path, you're definitely gonna want Sophie in here to,
And Sophie is with you,
yes.
your intern?
No. Sophie's one of our new attorneys in the office.
New attorney.
She's actually quite senior. She's
She's
had
brilliant.
30 years before this, does the labor and employment stuff,
Oh, all right.
portfolio that Damien transitioned away from.
Okay.
So a better version of John.
Exactly.
He said it. I wanted to say
Conceded it. I have no issues.
Not getting in the middle.
Mine's already in.
I think you're great, so.
What line are we on?
We're now starting section 4, so we'll be jumping to page 4.
Very good.
We did just talk about
Oh, all
this.
right.
So, an offender shall not be required to engage in unreasonable labor or to perform any work for which the offender is declared unfit. It's just cleanup language for, you'll see this sometimes through bills that we clean up old gendered language.
Yeah.
Subsection C, commissioner to establish written guidelines governing the hours and conditions of offender work, rates of compensation, and then the substantive addition. An offender shall be compensated at a rate that is equal to or greater than the federal minimum wage unless a different wage is required for that position pursuant to federal law. So basically just picking up whatever federal distinctions occur.
So when we're using the term offender here, we're talking only about sentence folks. We're not talking about detainees. Okay? That's the definition. Offenders are only sentence folks. When on page 2, I'm going to backtrack on B and C, where it says when an inmate shall be allowed easy access to telephone calls. That is detainees and sentence folks. Those are the nuances you have to pay attention to in language. Okay, folks?
Mhm.
Those are the nuances so you can really understand what is being said.
Yeah.
So for the work piece, you're only talking about sentence folks. You're not talking about detainees. Folks who are not sentenced. So the question is to DOC for offender work programs. If someone is a detainee for 2 years or 3 years, their case hasn't been resolved, are they currently doing any work in the facilities for compensation? Because here it's only saying it's folks who are sentenced. That's why I keep harping on reading the words and understanding it, because it really, that's what the laws are about. You got to understand what those words mean to understand what the statute really says and what the practice is in corrections.
If you're looking for those definitions, it's Title 28, Section 3. To call out one of the other benefits of knowing when a term is defined is it also lets you know when a term is not defined. like substantially higher or community, it's helpful to know when something is not precise. Because you can make an intentional decision to have imprecise language. That's a decision you can make. If you wanna be able to capture a lot of things under a console.
And we use the term in statute a lot, substantially. We use that a lot. Because it's a legal word. It's
It allows for discretion, basically.
it's for discretion. And we use it a lot.
I appreciate your frankness.
Just like we use notwithstanding.
I don't ever see the word fungible in
No, that, we don't use that really.
Like that.
outside of statute. Huh?
You want me to
Even-
put fungible or something? I can-
Fungible comes into, most compensations. I think I should start a log. You gotta be up to 10.
It's another term that's used, but not limited to. That
Yeah,
term.
So I take that.
It's used.
It's actually useless.
Then why have a list if it's?
Exactly. There's a negative implication created by that suggests that where you don't use it, you are limited. It's not true.
And that's why sometimes you're really careful in listing something. Because then you really limit it, you might miss something.
Yep. Put down our.
It's all these little nuances. You'll pick it up.
Yeah.
Time goes by, you'll pick it up.
Another thing on the inclusive, we could go down this rabbit hole forever, but on the inclusive list, the more that you expand an inclusive list, the more you seem to solidify what the thing is.
Yep.
You could actually end up narrowing
Yep.
the concept that you're trying to get at by having an exhaustive list.
More is less.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. The remainder of the subsection C is just some organizational changes to make this easier to read. Let's see, semicolons and the like.
Oh,
Oh, no.
Correct?
I just recalled the section 4 there, the
Yes.
interest that accrues is meant to make up for that rec fund that is currently funded by commissary kickback.
Yeah.
And the separate fund that I was talking about is section 2 that we would want to define better. How that fund gets split up.
And then what is meant by instruments in line 17? It's just stuff. Page 4, line 17.
For
4.
purchase approved books, instruments and instruction. Yeah. I think it's a general miscellany of items. Yeah.
Yep.
But approved, the approved would, I read the approved to apply across these.
Yes.
These are things not supplied by a correctional facility, so it's calling out things that would have to be approved.
And when will we, get my turn?
Mhm.
When will we try to define line 10 separate funds? Is that what you just were talking about? When are we gonna
Yeah.
define that?
But we got to decide whether or not we're doing.
Well, I
that.
know, but-
Yeah.
But depending on how you're gonna manage those separate funds, it can be really expensive or it can be cheap.
And just to be clear, this is existing law that wage payments of offenders are set aside in a separate fund. So that currently exists.
So to know what that is what I would be interested in knowing.
The size of it or what it's for or what do you?
Well, are they investing in the market or are they sticking it in a checking account?
They don't have either.
Well, I understand. I'm
Yes, it's funny.
getting what the extremes are, but
Yeah.
you can spend a lot of money investing.
Nothing to do
I
with
think
taking
that
it.
talking to DOC is going to be responsive to a lot of the
Yeah.
questions that you've had today. Yeah.
Sean?
Silly question maybe for Troy. What's actually a rec fund?
The rec fund.
Like
Go
what-
ahead, Troy.
What is that?
Well, no, so right now, the contracts we have with Keith, provide what I'm calling a kickback to the Department of Corrections, and that is used to fund a rec fund within the facilities, and that allows recreation, broadly defined.
Could be a movie night
Yeah.
with pizza.
Oh,
Could be,
okay, so it's,
you know,
but it's
it's
it's not
for the-
for an individual.
No, it's for the group.
It's for
It's
everybody.
for everyone. It's to
Okay.
provide something, so it could be a barbecue.
Yeah, I'm sure the DOC would be able to.
Yeah,
get-
they provide
So something special.
something special.
Okay. All right.
Please be too sure.
Might take it.
Correct.
Representative.
Sorry?
It's a different world in a facility than what we perceive. Very different. It's very structured, it's very limited, and it's very controlled.
I would hope that it was controlled.
It's very structured, it's very limited, and it's very controlled. And it's not controlled in terms of always security. It's controlled in many ways.
think just to echo some sentiments from when Troy did the preliminary introduction, I strongly suspect there's a lot more consensus in this room, in the commissary and telephone, the communication spaces, than there is on the wage states.
Yeah, sure.
Wages is a very tough conversation. It's
For the stars.
You shoot for the stars. Yep.
Eagle,
You know that. People may not even be at the C on that one. The heck with B and A, right?
I won't clarify the meaning of any proclamation.
Especially when you refer back to a change, not constitutional change that makes this one more possible.
Section 5. This is just operational updates that would flow through if you made those section 4 changes to incorporate the federal minimum wage. So this is tasking the Commissioner of Corrections on or before January 1, 2026 of updating their policies relating to inmate wages to comply with the requirements of that federal minimum wage. So only if you were pursuing section 4 would you also pursue the section 5. And then all of this to take effect on July 1, 2025. But obviously, the updates and pieces would flow thereafter. They wouldn't happen on July 1, 2025. And that is
It's the being.
page 294.
So if people are interested in doing more work on this, I think the next step is really to set up time with DOC.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's see if we can get DOC in next week. Good luck.
When are we trying to get a contractor into, Keith or whoever? That's what it'll be after DOC, but
That would be after DOC. I think there's so many questions in terms of how this functions in the DOC world that people need to have that understanding first.
cool.
Yeah.
Or if I could suggest, the vendor probably has very little input other than how they come up with their pricing. That could be a pretty short testimony, and we could either say, now we understand, and we don't have to go through all this, or they realize that they're on thin ice.
Has anyone in this room seen one of these
Because we're assuming
cafeterias?
this
I have
one
not.
we're gouging.
Anyone?
Yes.
You seen one, Troy?
During a tour of the women's facility, we did.
Does it look like a little store? Is it a?
No, it's
what is
like a vending machine, basically.
Is it like a vending
The
machine?
one that I saw, they had
Some of it.
collapsible tables laid out in the gym.
There's
basically.
no staffer there. There's not like a.
There was a staff.
Staff.
Clerk.
Oh, yeah, there'd be staff.
And there's inventory and I mean,
That's
it's,
another.
We saw like some shampoos, some
Yeah.
t-shirts, just, yeah.
Sometimes you go to a room that is there in the facility and you got a staff person there, you had to step out.
It'd be really nice if we get like a visual of one or two of them.
DOC could probably provide.
Yeah,
that.
and like
Yes.
maybe just
Oh.
random pricing of 10 items at one facility.
Yep.
Or
I've never even seen a picture.
just something to try to get a point of reference. It's so hard to talk about when I don't know if it's a Pinto or a 3-ton truck.
It's a bit.
It's Wesley.
Yeah.
Cinto. Going old school.
Could be a Corvair.
Oh, unsafe at any speed.
Yeah.
Oh,
I appreciated Troy sharing his vision before this. I guess I would like to share my opinion that if we are incarcerating someone, we need to provide for their needs. They shouldn't have to buy what they need. After that, it's a very different situation. It's been implied that they need to buy underwear or shirts. I'd like to understand what
Some of it.
that is, because
Sneakers. I mean, there are provided basics. But then there's additions to those basics.
Yeah, maybe you want something that fits better, feels nicer or whatever,
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
there's a basic concept
Yep.
here. They're incarcerated not because for various reasons. So
But
Do you guys want me to jump in 349?
Real quick.
Yeah, can do this relatively quickly, I think. So H 349. This is an act relating to the creation of the Vermont State Building Security Board. And so to orient folks, what we're talking about is in Title 29, so public property and supplies, there's a chapter 5A, which deals with state facility security. A really thin chapter, just 2 sections. And is currently set up, the Commissioner of BGS is responsible for security of all state facilities except that courthouses are under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court and the state house is under the jurisdiction of the Sergeant at Arms. What this bill does is it shifts responsibility for all state facilities other than the state house to a newly created Vermont State Building Security Board. That's what the bill as a whole does. So you're going to see those changes throughout in section 1, updating from Commissioner of BGS to this Vermont State Building Security Board. I will note that this is a rerun of a bill in years past. So I would have drafted this slightly differently than as done here, and we can make changes if people are into this concept. But what you see on the line, the new language that's underlined on lines 19 and 20, this is just pulling up the exceptions in existing law and making them part of the same pool. And this will be clear if I actually show you the statute without this struck through and underlined language. So just a second.
John, are you saying that just because you think the way it's written, it's not going to fly?
No. I think it works. So
Drafting evolves over the years.
and it'll be clear once I show you this. So the way that you see this set up,
What did you say, John? The one coming in.
it sets out what the commissioner is responsible for, and then it calls out particular exceptions from that in these subdivisions 1, 2, 3, and 4. The only reason I would pull that language up into the section above is because people are accustomed to those exceptions. You don't need to call them out as exceptions anymore if you're including them in the concept in the first place, right? So that's all that I mean to say is that if you're trying to pull 1, 2, and 3 up into this, you could literally just delete them because they would no longer be exceptions. But what the text does, and again, this is a rerun, is it actually just pulls those exceptions up into the main body. So it's a difference in style as to how you approach that. And what I would say, the advantage of this as drafted is that it makes clear for folks who are accustomed to the exceptions that exist in current law that they are now being pulled into this basis. But were it me drafting it from the start, I likely wouldn't have pulled them up. I would have just deleted them and said they're no longer exceptions.
So that's what you've done in the draft.
So this is just a rerun
Yeah,
of
rerun.
something from years past. So that's just to say, if you guys do go down this path, I'm comfortable with the language as drafted. But I personally find it cleaner to just remove the exceptions entirely.
But the big shift in this section 1 is shifting the responsibility of security from the Commissioner of BGS. If you read that on lines 15, what does that say, folks? What does line 15 and 16 say? Tell me what it says. In case, and Connie, you keep your mouth shut. But you can figure that.
I know what it says.
And same with Troy. What does that say? Lines 15 and 16.
But I'm not muted, so I'm not.
You're muted.
I'm not even sure I understand the nature of the question. Is it
What
whoever's
does
in,
it say?
Well,
What does it mean?
those in charge of security? It's no longer the commissioner of buildings and BGS. It's this nascent board.
Just want to make sure people understand when you see a line cross through something, which is the Commissioner of BGS. Right now, the Commissioner of BGS is responsible to ensure security
doesn't she,
in
doesn't,
state facilities. What this language does, it moves that responsibility by deleting the Commissioner of BGS language. And it shifts it to a new entity that's created, which is Vermont State Building Security. You understand the language?
yeah.
I mean, I understand time is getting short. Also, I don't just like, do we have legislative intent? Do we know why? I don't understand why.
That's what we're gonna be taking a look into.
Okay,
That's what we're gonna be taking a look into.
Yeah.
That's the question to ask is why.
okay.
So I do need to run in a second, but if you want me to just like quickly hit what the other piece of the bill, I mean, this is the core concept of the bill. So maybe I should just tell you the things that are helpful to think about. And this is one of them, like what is the value add from switching to this board? On page 2, you're just going to see in the various subsections B, C, D, and E, conforming changes to make the Vermont State Building Security Board responsible for creating security plans, for delegating responsibility for security, for security improvement authority, and for the relationship to state emergency operations plans. So anything where the commissioner was handling those duties. They've been updated to reflect this new Vermont State Building Security Board. So that's what the first section does. Section 2 actually stands up this Vermont State Building Security Board. So you're going to want to look at the membership of this. So that's what you see in subsection B. You're going to want to look at the length of their terms, so 6-year terms. And you're going to want to look at their capacity, so how many meetings they're holding per year. So at least 4 regular meetings a year. And then per diems are provided. Importantly, at the bottom of page 5, you can see that the board shall appoint the Director of Safety and Security, who shall hold office at the pleasure of the board. And the director, there's a listed set of responsibilities. This is at the top of page 6. So I would look at these responsibilities for that director. Section 3 sets up a building and courthouses police department. So this is created within the Department of Public Safety. Can appoint and remove at the commissioner's pleasure a buildings and courthouses police department officer to serve as chief. Officers within this department would have the same powers and authority as sheriffs and other law enforcement officers. Provides for compensation and setting various levels. And then spells out in subsection D that the buildings and courthouses police department shall provide security and law enforcement services for state buildings and courthouses. So basically, what you've seen at the beginning is all state facilities and the like, including courthouses, are now addressed by this Vermont State Building Security Board. And then the state house is dealt with separately through the Sergeant at Arms. And so that's why you see this here. And this would take effect July 1, 2025. I realize that's super high level and quick, but hopefully points to the pieces that are helpful to think about. And if folks have questions, shoot me an email and I can come back and we can talk about this again.
So we're gonna have BGS come in and talk about this, the board, but there is no board at this point, so you can't question folks on the board. But we'll have BGS come in to talk about how they provide security and what security is in the BGS world. And also how BGS is involved for emergency management situations, because that's a big piece to it. Could be a flooding situation. It could be with COVID. BGS was really full of all of that. Closing of buildings, redefining, just the whole structure. So we'll get into they've been unavailable this week because the commissioner has been tied up. But we've got them scheduled, I believe, for next week on this. And this is a big, BGS does a lot more than what we realize. So there'll be a long discussion on all of this, and then we just make that policy decision. Do we keep it with BGS? Do we set up a new board, or do we do something in the middle?
Yeah, and specifically to that point, you're taking an administrative function away from the administration. Vis-a-vis how the board is proposed. Yeah, and secondly, I'm curious how the Sheriff's Association felt about this.
With the courthouses?
Yes.
When are we gonna get the bill sponsor for intent? Because I'm wondering if the expertise and the scope of work is a volume of work.
We did. We-
Oh, I must have missed it when I was out.
It was when you were sick.
Must have been out, yeah.
Yeah, person came in. I
Okay,
think also you have to define what security is.
okay.
Because some of BGS's security is to make sure the building is secure. Because they're really looking at the people. And I think the board focus would be more the people secure. So you got to figure out, how do you define security? And how do you perceive it? From what perspective? In the world that you're in. Connor?
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into it a bit, I think, because, we talk about the physical structure quite a bit in institutions, but not the security piece.
With the people.
With the people, like
Yeah.
you're saying there.
It's a
So I
difference.
don't really have a preconceived notion of where it would end up, but this bill is a great catalyst to have that conversation, because you deal with things like when I was a union organizer, I remember, you probably remember Chair and Larry, 133, we had a bomb threat there, right?
133.
Yeah, so we found ourselves in a standoff with the director of security at BGS, who told everybody to hide under their desk with the bomb threat, because there's
And-
probably a sniper outside. And just a mass panic that ensued after that
Because they were more
was
fo-
wild,
They
yeah.
were more focused on the building than knowing the security protocols for people. So that's where you really have to figure out What do we mean by security? And what perspective are people approaching it by? And I think the bill perspective is the people perspective, not the building perspective. And BGS's perspective at times is more the building than the people. So we really have to delve into what does the term security mean for different folks. Anything else before we transition to Ben, but we're gonna take a break here, a little bit, 10-minute break. Anything else before we go out of YouTube? Come back in 10 minutes. Yeah, we'll be back. Let's go off of YouTube.